Now my special guest is on the phone right now. His name is Nardwuar.
The Human Serviette from CITR, FM 102, Cable 102, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and now Wednesday nights on WFMU.
That's right. It's very exciting. I want to welcome you, Nardwuar.
Well, I kind of feel like I've already been on WFMU before, even though I really haven't really been on it, but it's from all the great stories that I've heard of, like rock and roll bands going into WFMU and some of my own recordings getting played on WFMU, and also Cliff Nesteroff, who does the Generation Exploitation show on CITR in Vancouver here. He contributes to Beware of the Blog, so I'm oftentimes checking that out. So I kind of feel there is some sort of neat kind of parallels and connections between CITR in Vancouver, which I think Ken Friedman visited a couple of months ago, and WFMU.
That's correct.
And also, I think I've listened to a few shows. Terry T's show I've heard a few times, like her interviewing the Strokes and stuff like that.
Terry T is the host of the Cherry Blossom Clinic.
Yes, and that was the only show that I was able to find out, like, information about the Strokes, like where they talked about how they got together in, like, Turkish bathhouses. And I remember taking those quotes that were directly from, like, Terry T's show and then asking them to the Strokes, and it totally dumbfounded them because they couldn't remember where they said it, but they said it on WFMU. That's what I love about WFMU. You guys have been out there recording every little tidbit of information ready to be able to filter it through my brain for many, many years. So thank you very much for having me waste your time here today. Who canceled, Tom? Who canceled that you need me?
What? Are you kidding? I canceled other people. I threw Ted Leo out of here so I could make way for you.
Oh, I love Ted Leo because he mentions mods. I love it because he mentions mods in one of his songs.
Yes.
And because it kind of makes also me think of that song Barbarian Mods by the band Unrest. They had that song called like Barbarian. I just love like the word mods and stuff. And actually, I was thinking, is John there today? Because there's kind of a Vancouver connection.
He is not.
The connection is, of course, John is, you told me, drumming for A.C. Newman these days?
Yes, he is.
And what makes me think of A.C. Newman is, well, A.C. Newman, Carl Newman from the New Pornographers. Now, of course, I will be very clean speaking to you, Tom, now, because in Canada, there are 7 words that you can't say on the radio that you can say if you're able to justify them in Canada. So I've been, like, filthy for basically 22 years on CITR, and I'm going to have to clean up my act completely for what's going over there on WFMU.
That's right.
Have you got in trouble at all from any words that you've said over the air at all?
No, I run a clean show here. Soft PG is how I do it.
But has anybody ever complained, like when you play like an old song or something like this? Like, maybe you better stand by in a delay box, that song. We've got complaints on CITR from that old blues song.
Yeah. Well, we don't do filth like that.
Yeah, would you ever got complaints from that, like misunderstandings, from songs and stuff like that?
No, we keep it clean here. You'll learn the ropes, Nardwuar, the Human Serviette.
Well, because believe it or not, Carl Newman of the New Pornographers, he's a real trickster, and of course his solo band, A.C. Newman. I once interviewed him thinking that I was interviewing him, and it was actually the bass player of some band called Hardship Post, which is the first band from Newfoundland, Canada, signed to Sub Pop. Like, Carl tricked me. Like, so are you really Tom? How do I know you're really Tom?
Don't worry, I'm here.
This is really you.
You're here. Welcome. You're on the air. Everybody is excited. I'm looking at the chat right now for the show over at friendsoftom.com, and everybody's all excited that Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, is on the air. Now, Nardwuar, your show that you will be doing on WFMU on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What will be a typical show? What can people look forward to?
Pretty much a dumb, stupid variety show, just like I've been doing on CITR all these years. The first show coming up will feature the Vivian Girls, Jimmy Walker of Good Times, and Canadian Somalian rapper Kanan. So it's like all over the map. It used to be I would only interview punk bands. It was like you only interview punk, because, I was punk. I should only interview punk. And then somebody said to me, hey, man, this was about in the mid-'90s, the metal scene is really like the punk scene now, because remember, Teen Spirit all popped out, and all these metal guys were like, oh, my God, punk has started, it's killing me. So metal became the real underground, so I got interviewing metal bands, and then after a few years, I'm like, I only interview punk and metal, and then rap came along and got even more funny. So I was like, oh, I'll interview rap bands. So Snoop Doggy Dogg replaced Warrant. I was really into Warrant, and Skid Row, and I loved the double-tiered metal band names like Danger, Enough's Enough. I just love those names. And actually, Enough's Enough, they really got screwed by Howard Stern, didn't they?
How so?
Well, I think they were going to be like on the Private Part soundtrack, but then they were like axed from it because they weren't going to be enough of a selling point for that. Yes, I'm referencing the Private Part soundtrack. How desperate is that? But anyways, I found out all these neat little trivia tidbits about metal bands and rap bands. So to answer your question, Tom, just basically anything goes on a Nardwuar, the Human Serviette radio show on CITR and now WFMU.
Yes, and now people can get excited about it. They can check you out all over the internet. I on the nights when I'm sad, Nardwuar, and what I do is I go to the internet, and I'll watch you interview someone, be it a Katy Perry or a Lady Gaga, and then one interview turns into 2, which turns into 5. Which turns into 10, and I spend the whole night watching Nardwuar interviewing people on the YouTube, and then suddenly I'm in a good mood again.
Well, I'm so happy about that because I was going to say it's time that you won't get back.
No.
And if people do want to waste time, yes, Nardwuar.com, Nardwuar. It's Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, and human after the Cramps Human Fly, and again, rest in peace, Lux Interior, and Serviette because the United States of America, you don't have serviettes, you have
towels.
Napkins, Nardwuar, the Human Serviette. I've also used it when I've promoted concerts in Canada. The Nardwuar, the Human Serviette organization, we help serve the youth. So like when you phone up the church, we serve. What's Nardwuar? Oh, we help serve the youth. And yes, we book the gigs in the churches for like the punk rock and roll bands. And I was just going to say though, Tom, and I hope I'm not keeping you here. Am I keeping you?
No, please. The floor is yours.
I was just going to say the AC Newman-John connection, like why I wanted to bring up John, your co-host, was because what's really cool, and I wanted to find this out, and I'm not sure if he actually was, because a lot of times, I'll tell stories, and I will only get them about 75% right. So I could be telling something that's 25% wrong, and I was hoping that John would be able to fill in. But anyways, AC Newman, Carl Newman from the New Pornographers, when he was doing his solo record, the first one, he got to play on the greatest New York talk show, aside from the best show on WFMU, on TV ever. And what show would have that been that AC Newman might have played on with John on drums?
That would be The Late Show with David Letterman.
Not quite, although he has been on there quite a few times, and Nico Case has been on there a few times. But no, let's just kind of go a bit lower. Like, what is the standing for the talk shows in New York, right?
I would say you start with the David Letterman at the top of the pyramid.
Right.
Then you have your Daily Show and Colbert Report.
Okay, and then we have Uncle Floyd.
Then you have Uncle Floyd, well below that.
And how about some canceled? Okay, I'm kind of giving it away here. How about some canceled TV shows?
Some canceled TV shows.
Canceled talk shows from New York that might have had somebody like Carl Newman, AC Newman, alternative band play on it.
Are you talking about the Conan O'Brien show?
No, not the Conan O'Brien show. More low, like kind of low and kind of ridiculous. Like, oh my God, okay, I'm giving away here. He has a talk show? He's a guy who likes yelling at people. In sports.
In sports?
In sports. He's a sportsman. He played a sport. He's a commentator on a television network, but he used to have a talk show for a couple months.
Morton Downey Jr.? He
we're
owned an
so
ABA
close,
team.
Tom. We're so close to it.
Richard Bay?
He used to yell at people, and he held a tennis racket.
Oh, John McEnroe.
The John McEnroe television show.
Right, on CNBC.
Do you you remember? So was I wrong? How would you have described the John McEnroe TV show?
I think you summed it up. He was a sportsman who turned to talk show hosting and hosted a failed show.
But what I think is so great is like they're like, hey, Carl, you've just signed to Matador Records. You've left Mint Records in Vancouver, but you're on Matador, and we're going to set you up with a great talk show experience. You get to be on the John McEnroe talk show, which was amazing because that night, believe it or not, Tom, when Carl Newman played on that show, Al Sharpton was the guest. That's incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, like a kid from Vancouver on the same show in New York City, the Big Apple, with Al Sharpton. And at the end of the show, and this possibly is two moments that I love Carl Newman and the New Pornographers and indirectly John Worster for, and I was wondering if John played drums on this. So here we have Carl Newman playing the John McEnroe TV show, and at the very end of the show, John McEnroe comes out and jams with the band. John McEnroe jams.
Yes, he fancies himself an axeman.
So they picked the song to jam on, and it was The Witch by the Sonics, legendary Northwest garage rock band. Isn't that incredible? John McEnroe playing the Sonics with Carl Newman and possibly John Worster and Al Sharpton playing maracas on the John McEnroe TV show that got canceled. Oh, I just love that. That was just a great moment for somebody in Vancouver. And the second one was that the New Pornographers and Carl have provided again. You know, I think he actually lives in New York at this time. And hello, Carl, if you're listening, was when his band, the New Pornographers, played on the David Letterman show, because I got to bring it back to the David Letterman show because you mentioned that. And the drummer for the New Pornographers, Kurt Dahl, who used to play in a heavy metal band called Age of Electric. Yeah, there's a lot of things from Canada that are confusing, including me, Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, and you're listening to me, Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, on WFMU, and I'm speaking to Tom from the best show! Well, one of the confusing things about Canada, aside from Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, is the drummer Kurt Dahl, the New Pornographers, again, a great musician. He wore a T-shirt for the band Slow, S-S-L-O-W, who were an unheralded grunge, proto-grunge band from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, who broke up just as Nirvana were getting big, who could have made it big. So this band from Vancouver, Slow, finally makes it to the David Letterman show in the form of a T-shirt worn by Kurt Dahl, the drummer of the New Pornographers, not the drummer of John Worster. So the question is, was John Worster on the John McEnroe TV show, and what T-shirt was he wearing? That's my big question.
I will find out. I'm going to find out for you, Nardwuar.
But these are all the great moments that New York and indirectly WFMU have helped created for me. That's why I kind of feel somewhat familiar with all that.
Well, it's all coming coming full circle. Now, Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, who will be hosting a show on WFMU starting, is it next week or the week after?
It should be starting on October the 14th.
Okay.
So I guess that's in about a week, and it's going to be between 7 and 8 p.m. on WFMU. And other episodes coming out, we should have like Daniel Johnson, Girl Talk, Iggy Pop, how the moon landing was faked. Just a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going to dig up from the vaults and some new stuff as well.
One of my favorite interviews that you've conducted, Nardwuar, was when you talked to Pharrell Williams.
Of the band N.E.R.D.
Yes.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because remember I was mentioning like I interviewed metal bands and then I got into rap bands, and the rap bands, they didn't really react too well. Like Snoop Dogg, he kind of was fun to react to, but a lot of them don't react well. So I couldn't believe it that Pharrell was so into the interview that after the interview, he said to me, that was the best interview I've had in a long time or whatever. And I'm like, oh, can you help get me an interview with Jay-Z? And he actually did.
Yes.
Like, I couldn't believe it.
Because
so, like, ask people. You never know what will actually happen. He was just super cool that he actually set that thing up.
Yes.
I just couldn't believe that it happened.
Because if people need some perspective on what Nardwuar does, is when you do these interviews, you dig and you probe the people's past, and then you often surprise them with props and records and things that bring back their past right to them in that exact moment, and you get different reactions from people when all of a sudden you reach into your bag and pull out some record that they appeared on back when they were starting off, or it's just. And it gets a different kind of reaction out of them, and it's very with Pharrell Williams. It was very moving. He was actually moved by the thought you had put into the interview.
And what's kind of scary scary about that is it went very well. He set me up with Jay-Z, and guess what's happening next week? Jay-Z and Nardwuar Pharrell are both coming to Vancouver playing on the same gig, and I was bugging Pharrell's assistant to try to get me an interview with Pharrell and Jay-Z again. I sure hope it can happen, but I was thinking if it did happen, I wonder if I could do as good as I did before. I probably wouldn't, but that's kind of my dream to try again. I don't know. How do you know when you're pushing it too many times? How do you know when you're pushing it?
Yeah, you can't worry about that. You just do it.
Also, I should say, I rely on friends of mine who have been involved in radio or in bands and stuff like that for information, too. I was hopefully going to do an interview with that band Death Clock, you know, the guy who does that Metalocalypse TV show.
Yes. Brendan Small.
But they did not allow the interview to happen. I was all prepared, but they just blew it off. Maybe because he doesn't want an in-person interview or something like that. But I had found out through my friend Leora, who worked for the CBC in Canada and now lives in Boston and goes to school there and helps out at Harvard and stuff like that. She told me about this thing, the fluffernutter. Have you heard of the fluffernutter?
No.
The fluffernutter is some localized Boston treat. It's like marshmallow and peanut butter.
Yes,
and kids like put it on their sandwiches, some legendary sort of thing.
Oh, yes, it's disgusting.
Exactly. And I found out that Brendan from Death Clock was actually growing up, or at least went to school in Boston. So I was going to ask him about the fluffernutter via my friend Leora. So I had like some fluffernutter that I was hopefully going to like special order from a store in Vancouver and bring it to him and have him taste it. So you get the ideas from your friends too. It isn't just like yourself. It's kind of like a whole group of people.
Yes, and the cumulative it builds to the point where it's you and them. And you put these things in front of them. What has been one of the most surprising reactions you've ever gotten when you've reached into your bag of surprises for an interview subject and put something in front of them?
Well, one, and people can check it out at YouTube, was the exact opposite. I didn't get a chance to put it in my bag because before I could reach into my bag to give them a gift in 1991, Sonic Youth reached into the bag, took out a record I was going to give them as a gift and broke it right in front of the camera and then ripped up my questions that I was going to ask them, which was pretty crazy. So that was one of the wildest reactions, and then I didn't get this chance to show it to them. They actually broke this record that I was bringing to them as a gift.
Oh, Sonic Youth.
However, in a weird sort of twist of things,
yes,
Andrew WK, as a young child growing up, yes, I guess I've been around that long, got a copy of that interview from a woman called Sue Pachalski, who worked for Caroline Records, who was familiar with my record label, Nardwuar Records, and actually we just put out a split between my band, The Evaporators, and Andrew WK called A Wild Pair, P-E-A-R. And Sue Pachalski passed this tape on to Andrew WK, because I guess maybe Andrew knew people at Caroline Records. Andrew WK saw my Sonic Youth interview, and the first time I met Andrew WK, he said to me, I am the way I am today because I saw your interview with Sonic Youth, and I swore I would never, ever, ever be like Sonic Youth. I would always be great in interviews and be happy and never break anything.
Wow.
And
Holy
years
moly.
later, what happens? We do a split 7-inch. The Evaporators, my band with Andrew WK, and years later also, which I think is great, always happens to me in my life, Andrew WK has a new record coming out on Thurston Moore's record label. Baboom. So it turned out just fine, I guess, in the end.
It loops all the way around, and Nardwuar wins in the end.
And who did I ask for questions for Lady Gaga? You mentioned my interview with Lady Gaga. I asked Andrew WK. I said, Andrew, I'm going to be interviewing Lady Gaga. What is your wildest club experience? I didn't say Lady Gaga. What is your wildest club experience in New York? And he told me some story about some bondage club in New York where you step up to the bar, and to get up to the bar, the step is actually a man under a carpet, and the man moans.
Well, I don't like that.
You don't like that place? Well, I told that story to Lady Gaga, and she had been to that bar, and she loved that question. So I used Andrew WK for a question to Lady Gaga, which was kind of neat. So that was interesting to get that across. And you mentioned Katy Perry. Yes, I asked Andrew WK for some questions to ask Katy Perry, and we got Andrew WK to record a video message to Katy Perry. So it's fun getting stuff totally connected, how everything like works that way.
It is interesting how it loops around, and people on WFMU now finally are going to get a taste of
Nardwuar and Human Serviette. And I guess if they're wondering what sort of foul taste they're tasting right now, again, it's Nardwuar.com, or I guess go to YouTube and you can actually check out that Katy Perry interview as well. But I just love interviewing people. And another thing, Tom, I just wanted to mention is, like, I guess, I'm just sitting around the house and I'm just like, I'm the only one stupid enough to spend that much time researching people. Many, many people could do great interviews and stuff like that if they really just put their mind to it. And anybody can do a radio show, really, at CITR in Vancouver. It's $20 to join for UBC students and $35 for non-students. And they show you how to use equipment, and anybody can do a show. And that's what I love too about campus community radio is you're doing your show and people are hearing me for the first time on WFMU, but when I do my show on CITR, people phone up and go, when did you get on CITR? I'm like, I've been on here for 22 years. That's why I love it. The listeners keep you on your toes, don't they, Tom? They don't stand for that sort of stuff. There's no screening on the best show on WFMU, is there?
No screening?
Yeah, no call screening. You let anybody through.
Oh, you seriously, you must be joking.
No, I'm not. I'm serious.
Because
campus community radio. You let me through. You let anybody through,
but
right?
This is the way it goes here. I think we have this is where you and I part ways. My philosophy, Nardwuar, is that you treat the listeners like animals. They are animals, and you beat them like... No, I don't feel that way about them. Sometimes I do. Sometimes certain cases require the carrot. Other cases require the stick.
And that actually is some lyrics to a Pansy Division song, which I will not repeat.
No.
You know that song, eh? You've got the carrot, I've got the stick.
No, we're not talking about Pansy Division.
Yes,
but,
and then we'll blank like bunnies, yeah.
Well, yes. Well, Nardwuar, seriously, I have been a huge fan of yours for years.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate, your interest, and I'm honored just to phone into your show. That's so cool that you actually know who How did you discover me? Just interneting, or I'm kind of dumbfounded.
Everybody knows Nardwuar. Everybody knows that Nardwuar. I heard about you before the internet started, and you would hear people would play little tapes of things that they had gotten their hands on, and then when the internet came along, boom, it exploded, and I had a chance to get as much Nardwuar as my little head could handle. And you know what? There's no limit to the amount of Nardwuar I want, and you're going to get it. Everybody's going to get it on WFMU starting next week.
October 14th. And I just want to say thank you to Brian Lamb, who is a listener of my radio show in Vancouver, Canada, because when Ken, WFMU station manager, came to Vancouver, Brian told Ken all about the Nardwuar to Human Serviette radio show, and that's how Ken learned about the Nardwuar to Human Serviette radio show and recommended me to WFMU. So that's how it all started. A guy in Vancouver, Brian Lamb, a listener of the Nardwuar to Human Serviette radio show, which is really great, and I really appreciate it. And apparently what Ken really enjoyed about my interviews was my 1998 interview with Geddy Lee and my 1996 interview with Iggy Pop, and that's all Ken heard. So I guess he hasn't really heard anything in the past 11 years. That's what's so flattering about it. So I kind of feel like it's like 1996 or 1998 now, because he was really digging those interviews.
Well, he's got a treat waiting for him. He's got 12 years of catching up to do.
How were Superchunk albums in 97, 98 versus the reunion album that possibly could be coming out?
Oh, I think it's all going to be... I high hopes. The EP that came out earlier this year was fantastic.
One band that has always kind of upset me a bit is Volcano Suns. Do you remember that band?
Of course I do.
Now, did that feature Mission of Burma members?
Peter Prescott, the drummer.
Because they totally jacked me when I was presenting a gig. I was mentioning I presented gigs. It was Nardwuar to Human Serviette. Mm-hmm. And get this, it was Nardwuar to Human Serviette presents the Headcoats, the Mummies, the Girl Trouble from Tacoma, Washington, my band, the Evaporators, and a band called The Worst. That's an incredible, aside from, The Worst and the Evaporators, that's quite a lineup, isn't it?
Good, to have the Headcoats with Billy
The
Talent,
Headcoats, the Mummies,
and Girl Trouble, from T-Town.
Plus local openers, the Evaporators, and a band called The Worst from Vancouver. No hardcore band, but a local garage band called The Worst. So we put on that gig in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and that same gig, I think the night before at the off-ramp in Seattle, this is 1991, packed it. 1,200 people. But me, stupidly thought this will be good for an all-ages gig. So I put on an all-ages gig the same night as the Volcano Suns, and my gig tanked. It tanked so bad that at the end of the night, I had to tell my good buddy, Randy Iwata from Mint Records, who put out the original New Pornographers recordings and put out the Evaporators Andrew WK 7-inch. I said, Randy, can you please go to the bank machine and take out $900 so we can pay the bands?
Mm-hmm.
It was awful.
That's not good.
It was awful. We did pay the bands, and then a week later we put on a gig with Fugazi, and we also had Me, Mom, and Morgenthaler, a ska band, and we had the Fastbacks and a couple other bands play, and we should have had the Headcoats and Fugazi play together, but we didn't think it would actually mesh. And that's a legendary gig that happened in North Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where I had to buy $800, it's always around $800 worth of portable toilets to make the gig actually happen, because the guy putting together the gig said, we have you buy your blank. If you don't have proper toilets, we're going to shut this thing down. So we bought $800 worth of portable toilets so that we could put them in his hockey rink. Ian Mackay wasn't too happy about that. He said, this is a hockey rink. I go, well, there's kind of some wood here. So he was kind of angry about that. But still, we pulled off the gig, but not one person used the toilet. So it was really depressing, spending $800 on portable toilets, and nobody used them because everybody just used the hockey rink washrooms anyway. So that was kind of my connection to the Volcano Suns that I guess they kind of jacked me in 1991. Should I forgive them?
It's time, Nardwuar.
Okay,
it's time.
okay. Because I think Mishra Burma came to Vancouver, and I didn't go to the gig. So I do have these weird sort of hang-ups, and thank you for helping me release this frustration there, Tom, on the best show on WFMU, and I'm Nardwuar, the Human Serviette, from the Nardwuar, the Human Serviette show on WFMU. Sorry about that.
Nardwuar?
Listeners, if you're angry, I apologize.
My producer is giving me the signal. He's saying I have to move on.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the interest. If anybody's bored, check out, well, you probably already are bored, nardwuar.com for some more information. And thanks again, Tom. I really appreciate it. Maybe I'll hit you up for some questions one day.
Yes, please do. And Nardwuar, thank you for coming to WFMU and joining our family. It's very exciting, and I cannot wait for your show to start.
Well, it's a real honor, and thank you, Brian Lamb from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, a listener for the Nardwuar, the Human Serviette radio show, and thank you also CITR Radio, and thank you, Ken, too, for coming to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and thank you also, Duncan, and all these other people. Yes, I have a thank you list for getting on WFMU. I think more people that are on WFMU should have a thank you list, apology type thing, but now I guess you're trying to Kanye West me, and I'm up with my Taylor Swift time. So, well, thanks so much, Tom. Keep on rocking in the free world, and doot-doot-a-loot-doo.
Do I really get to do this?
Yeah, I guess so. By the way, I was just going to say the best. Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
Dude. Oh, man, you. Well, I got thrown off there. Oh,
No. You're here. I'm going to do it.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. Keep on rocking in the free world, and doot-doot-a-loot-doo.
Doot-doo.
All right.
Bye. Nardwuar. The Human Serviette. Some of that Canadian speed. Must be cheap up in Vancouver. I think he's awesome. I have been a fan of his for ages. I'm very excited he's on the WFMU. I can't believe I got to do the sign-off, the doot-doot-a-loot-doo. I never thought I'd get to do that. Wait a minute. He signed off on my show. This is not his show. How does he sign off on me? Yeah. I don't like that.
See you next week.